Hello everyone, I'm Andy Calitz of Future Energy, and with me as your other tour host today is Boitumelo Sehlake of Sehlake Energy Solutions in Johannesburg. And we look forward to taking you on the African Energy Supply Transition Tour. We'll be visiting 25 countries and 45 energy sites on our tour to see energy at work in Africa. And to gain a good understanding of the energy transition, it is necessary to look at all 7 the primary energies, to look at power systems, and to look at CO2 emissions. And at the outset of our tour, let us also recognize that Africa comprises 54 countries sharing one continent, united in the African Union, but each country with their own identity, own cabinet, own priorities, and own energy transition path. Before we look at energy supply today, we're going to look at the demand for energy and electricity in homes and dwellings, for minerals and mining, for agriculture, and for broadband and data centers, all so key to the future of Africa. Boitumelo, electrification of homes is again in the news.
Andy, there's a continued crisis in Africa in terms of lack of access to energy and electricity. Headlines tell a story of Africa's electricity demand rising fast, the middle class boost power consumption, Sustainable Development Goal 7 progress lags in Africa, Mission 300 targets 300 million electrified, and energy access drives job creation. So Andy, with this in mind, tell us a bit more about the Mission 300 targets.
Boitumelo, this image of the share of population with basic access to electricity tells the whole difficult picture for Africa. In Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Gabon, and South Africa, 90 to 100% of the population have access. But in the DRC, South Sudan, the Central African Republic, Chad, and Niger, that access is less than 20%. And as you described in the headlines, Boitumelo, currently the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and the Rockefeller Foundation are financing, with other partners, a very ambitious campaign to bring electricity to an additional 300 million people in Africa by 2030. So let's move on to electricity and energy in mining.
Mining contributes more than 10% of the GDP in many African countries. It provides millions of direct and indirect jobs across mines, logistics, and processing industries. Exports of these key minerals supply vital foreign exchange, strengthening national budgets and fiscal stability. When you get mining again, it stimulates investment in infrastructure, notably power generation, transport corridors, and water systems. Resource revenues fund education, healthcare, and drive long-term diversification across African countries. Here again, news headlines tell a story of continuous change in mining. We look at the Guinea bauxite exports that rise 23% despite regulation. The Tharisa commits $547 million to underground platinum expansion. Mali begins constructing Russia-backed national gold refinery, while Congo to replace cobalt export ban with quotas. And in the Inval, which reduces 2025 copper output guidance after the Komai-Kakula restart. So with this, Andy, where does mining take place in Africa?
Africa's vast metal and mineral reserves are vital for global industry and clean energy transitions, positioning our continent as a cornerstone of future resource scarcity. Below us we see where the main mines and processing facilities and smelters are located in Africa. And it is clear that mining for gold, for copper, for the platinum group metals, diamonds, cobalts, bauxite, iron ore, and uranium plays a key role in many economies. And those mines in Africa use diesel for drilling, for hauling, and backup power in remote off-grid and mobile operations, and use electricity for crushing, milling, ventilation, processing plants, and refining across large industrial mining complexes.
Agriculture employs over half of Africa's workforce, sustaining millions of rural livelihoods. It contributes significantly to the GDP, export earnings, and the national food security. Agricultural growth drives poverty reduction, industrialization, and the overall economic resilience. News headlines here tells a story of the importance of energy in African countries. We look at battery storage that powers remote agribusiness hubs across Ghana. Kenya launches a program to electrify dairy, tea and tea farms, while Nigeria installs mini-grids for rural rice processing, and Ethiopia piloting the electric tractors to increase crop yields. On the other hand, Senegal expands solar cold storage for fisheries exports. Andy, let's see where farmers actually farm in Africa.
Below us we see the main agricultural products of various countries. And the most important agricultural products in Africa for domestic consumption are maize, cassava, rice, sorghum and yams, staples feeding hundreds of millions of Africans daily. And the five most valuable agricultural export products are cocoa, coffee, tea, cotton and horticultural flowers, which earn vital foreign exchange and sustain millions of farming livelihoods across the continent. That requires energy for irrigation, for mechanization, for processing, for drying, for refrigeration, and the transportation of food to markets. And as we will see later, solar power is increasingly the answer.
Reliable electricity is essential to power broadband networks and data centers, enabling digital connectivity, cloud services, and Africa's expanding digital economy. News headlines here, again, it tells a story of the importance of energy in African countries. Africa data center booms increases electricity demand in continent-wide. The broadband growth drives solar power data hub investment, while the power shortages threaten Africa's digital infrastructure growth. Renewable macrogrids power remote edge data centers, and telecoms utilities collaborate to strengthen broadband resilience. Let us now see the situation regarding broadband and data centers in Africa.
The availability of internet access and the deployment of data centers both need reliable electricity in Africa. And on the left, we can see that Africa shows the lowest global internet penetration, mostly below 50%. Northern and southern regions display stronger connectivity than Central Africa. Coastal nations outperform inland ones due to submarine cable access, and rapid mobile broadband expansion offers some hope for future inclusion. On the right hand, we can see that Africa hosts over 230 data centers across 39 countries. South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya lead in facility numbers. Rapid growth is driven by cloud, by the fintech and digitalization demands, and energy access for cooling and connectivity remains major challenges. New builds increasingly integrate solar and renewable energy sources into these data centers.
Now that we have looked at electrification, mining, and agriculture, what does that mean for energy and electricity demand? News headlines tell a story of the importance of energy in African countries, where we see that Africa's electricity demand surges with urban industrial growth. Mining and data centers drive Southern Africa's power demand. East Africa's manufacturing boom strains national power grids, while the middle class growth boosts reliable electricity consumption. West Africa, on the other hand, records peak demand amid electrification drive. And is the demand for energy growing slowly or fast in Africa?
Boitumelo, the demand for primary energy of Africa is 6,000 terawatt hours, and it is growing very, very slowly. On a per capita basis, it's 1/10 of the same for the Asia Pacific region. Let's also look at electricity. And the same holds for electricity demand in Africa, which is at about 1,000 terawatt hours. This is equivalent to 1/6 of the per capita demand of Asia, including the large populations of China and India. So with that said, let's start our journey with natural gas.
When we look at gas is used for power generation in industry. It supplies about 14% of energy when we include wood, 29% of primary energy if we exclude wood, 43% of electricity, and 43% of production is exported by pipeline LNG, while very insignificant gas is imported only into Egypt. News headlines here tell us that Shell approves the offshore LNG, gas to LNG project in Nigeria. ENI launches the second floating LNG platform off of Mozambique, while Total Energies prepares to relaunch Mozambique LNG mega project, and Congo introducing the new gas code to attract investment. On the other hand, Tanzania announces natural gas discovery in the Mtwara region. Andy, let us see where gas is produced.
"13 African countries produce gas. See each of the pink markers below us, and 43% of that production is exported. Pipeline gas is only exported to outside of Africa to Europe via Spain and Italy by Algeria, as we see in the north. No LNG is really imported to Africa except from time to time to Egypt. And LNG is exported, as we see the shipping markers, by Algeria, Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, Cameroon, Congo, Angola, Mozambique, Egypt, and Senegal, Mauritania. Algeria, Nigeria, and Mozambique also trade internally, and significantly, Africa is now deploying floating LNG facilities to accelerate the development of exports. Let's visit 4 places: Azu, Coral, Congo FLNG, and Tortue FLNG. Most LNG cargoes from Africa have been exported mainly to Europe from Azu LNG in Algeria that we see below us. That started way back in 1964 already. It has a capacity of 20 million tons per year, and we can see the facilities. Mozambique is a country with high proven gas reserves, and Coral South Floating LNG, led by ENI, started producing LNG in 2022. This was the first LNG from the African East Coast. The second FLNG unit, Coral North, now under development, will add to that in due course. And a land-based 12 million ton project in the north at Pemba, led by Total Energies, Mozambique LNG, has just lifted its force majeure on its construction. And the operator of the deepwater block off Mozambique, Rovuma Venture, comprising Exxon, ENI, and China National Petroleum Corporation, has been doing front-end engineering and design. ENI is building on its floating LNG experience from Mozambique and Congo Floating LNG, with ENI as the operator. It started production here in the Republic of the Congo in 2024 with a capacity of 1 million tons per year. And a second FLNG is under construction to add a further 3.5 million tons per year capacity. Tortue FLNG is a joint venture between Mauritania and Senegal, located on their maritime border. The project is one of the deepest subsea developments in Africa, with the production facilities at 2,850 meters below sea level. Capacity is 2.5 million tons, and first cargo was shipped earlier this year. But Africa does not only export gas, several countries also use it for power generation. Below us we see gas-fired power plants in Africa. Total capacity is 100 gigawatts. Most of that capacity resides in Egypt, Algeria, and Nigeria, and they all rely on domestic gas. Let's visit one of them, Burulis, in Egypt. Here on the Mediterranean, we can see the Burulis gas-fired power plant, the largest in Africa. Capacity is 6,500 megawatts, larger than the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that we will visit later. It reduces Egypt's dependence on imported electricity. At the same time, Egypt often has to import LNG. And having looked at Burulis, let's take a look at the role of gas in power generation overall in Africa. Let's look at the sources of electricity in all of Africa. Africa consumes 1,000 terawatt hours of electricity, growing at about 3% per year. And for comparison, we can see that South Africa is 250 terawatt hours of that. Germany as a country is at 600 terawatt hours, and Japan is at 1,000 terawatt hours. In terms of power generation, it is very clear that gas is the largest at 42%. That coal is at 25%, mainly in South Africa. Hydro at 17%, oil at 7%, and solar and wind at about 3% each. Now, let's take a look at oil, the largest primary energy in Africa.
Oil is for transportation, power generation, and petrochemicals as well. It supplies about 21% of energy, 42% of primary energy, 9% of electricity, and 65% of the production is exported, while 10% of what is consumed is actually imported. Headlines here tell us that Shell acquires ENI oil stakes in the Ivory Coast in Congo, while Nigeria increases oil production through new investment reforms. We look at Algeria, which has signed $5.4 billion oil gas development agreement, while Dangote refinery plans to double the existing production capacity. Moving to Uganda and Tanzania crude pipelines reaching its completion, its first oil imminent, and Namibia's offshore discoveries, which positions it as an energy frontier. With this in mind, let's see which countries actually produce and export oil.
"17 African countries produce oil, as we can see at each of the yellow markers. And the largest oil producers are Nigeria, Angola, Algeria, Libya. And Libya remains politically unstable, but now produces 1.6 million barrels per day. And the 6 million barrels of African oil production is split 3.5 million barrels offshore in Nigeria, Angola, Ghana, and Equatorial Guinea, and 2.5 million barrels per day onshore between mainly Algeria and Libya. Offshore Namibia may be next. Nigeria is the largest oil producer in Africa at 1.5 million barrels per day, but that depends on how much Libya is producing. Nigeria, Angola, and Algeria and Libya are among the top oil exporters, and that oil revenue is absolutely crucial income for many African countries, particularly those with significant oil reserves. But this makes their economies vulnerable to fluctuations in global oil prices. Several African oil-producing countries face challenges in terms of infrastructure, including old pipelines, storage facilities, and transportation networks. These constraints can hinder production and exports. Let's visit Nigeria and also Libya. In Nigeria, onshore security challenges, depletion of onshore reserves, technological improvements, and government policies have increasingly shifted oil production from onshore to offshore. And the Egina floating production, storage, and offloading vessel is an example of this, capable of storing 2.3 million barrels of oil. And the FPSO is located over a field at water depths of between 1.4 and 1.7 kilometers, approximately 200 kilometers offshore Port Harcourt. And at the time of construction, the Egina was the largest ever built by Total Energies. Below us we see Libya's largest oil field, the El Sharara oil field located in the Motsug Desert in southwestern Libya. It has proven reserves of 3 billion barrels of oil, and the field is capable of producing 300,000 barrels of light crude per day, making it one of Libya's largest oil fields. Libyan oil production is severely impacted by political unrest in the country, as I said earlier. And let's now see where oil is refined on the continent. Africa has 43 oil refineries varying in size and capacity and age. The total refining capacity is 3 million barrels per day. And the refineries produce petrol and diesel for Africa's 50 million vehicles, jet fuel, kerosene and lubricants. Many of the refineries are relatively old, with some dating back several decades, and this can lead to inefficiencies and higher operating costs. In South Africa, for example, energy majors like Shell and BP have exited refining, and refineries are being turned into import terminals. Despite domestic refining capacity, many other African countries still rely heavily on imported refined petroleum products to meet their demand. And this makes them vulnerable to global oil price fluctuations. Let's visit two of the refineries, Skikda and Dangote. Below us we see the Skikda refinery in Algeria, operated by Sonatrach. It has been the largest in Africa with a capacity of 335,000 barrels per day, but we can clearly see that it's 60 years old. Sonatrach is working to improve its efficiency and product quality, but it has now been overtaken by Dangote in Nigeria. Located on the outskirts of Lagos in Nigeria, the Dangote petrochemical complex produces a wide range of products, and the Dangote Group is the sole owner of the petrochemical complex with a capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. Production commenced in 2024 after challenges and disputes, including delays in construction and various financing issues. I consider it unlikely that any significant new refining capacity will be built in Africa beyond Dangote, or Dangote expanded. Capital is just too short, and the international oil companies are unwilling to build new refineries. Also, refined products are available from large refineries in the Middle East and in India. Whilst we're here, let's do two side visits to see the important role of diesel in electricity in African mines. We travel to the Calitz uranium mine in Niger, one of the world's largest. It's located in the Sahara Desert that we can see below us. It's operated by the French company Arriva. It employs 303,000 people and is a major source of income for the Nigerian government. It needs energy for extraction, for crushing, for ventilation, and for groundwater pumping systems, and that electricity comes from diesel generators and also grid electricity. The Bouquet region hosts one of the world's largest bauxite reserves, and below us we see the Bouquet bauxite mining complex in Guinea. Guinea supplies over 20% of global bauxite exports annually, and they feed the alumina refineries in China and the Middle East. Mining and rail uses diesel and heavy fuel oil, and hydropower is used for crushing and conveying in this complex. With that done, let's look at primary energy in Africa. When we look at African primary energy supply, it is very clear that energy demand is growing with population growth and with economic growth. It is clear that oil for transportation and for power generation is the largest at 42% of primary energy supply. That gas for power generation and industry is second largest at 29%. And that coal for power generation and steel and liquid fuels production is 20%. Hydropower is at 7%, and wind, solar and nuclear are all extremely small. But the untold story is wood. Africa on a daily basis consumes as much wood as oil and gas and coal together. And this is never shown in the data representations of Our World in Data or the International Energy Agency. Wood is a primary fuel source for cooking and heating in many parts of Africa, especially in rural areas where people rely on wood for cooking, and 600 million use it for heating. And the 1.2 billion tons of wood consumed annually for these purposes equates to 4.8 terawatt hours, and you can see that on the terawatt hour scale. The resulting deforestation in Africa is 50,000 square kilometers per year, which is extremely alarming. It is the land area of the whole of the country of Togo. With that said, let's move from oil to see where solar power is going.
Africa, along with Australia, has, as a continent, the best solar potential. Solar has already brought convenience to millions of Africans. The hard reality, however, is that despite the solar progress we see, solar supplies only 0% of energy, 1% of primary energy, and 4% of electricity. Headlines tell us that Nigeria actually leads Africa's $3 billion solar expansion. The Sun King unveils African off-grid manufacturing plants, while Zambia opens a 100 megawatt solar plant for miners. Rwanda plans $16 million of solar electrification program, while Mali expands rural solar power despite challenges. Andy, please do show us where solar farms have been built in Africa.
Below us we see at each of the green dots the major African solar farms. Africa's installed PV capacity reached 15 gigawatts at 555 solar farms and is now growing at about 3 gigawatts per year, which is quite significant. And we can quite clearly see the concentrations in South Africa, in Egypt, Morocco, Nigeria, Angola, and Namibia. South Africa has the largest solar capacity at 6 gigawatts, Egypt 2 gigawatts, and Morocco 1 gigawatt. Let's visit a few solar farms in Mariental, in Benban, Noor, Defki, Ruida, and also off-grid in Eastern Africa. Mariental hosts one of Namibia's first large grid-connected solar farms that we can see below us, and the 37 megawatt plant supplies clean power into the Nampower grid. And it demonstrates Namibia's strong solar potential and private sector investment in the country. Let's see how solar farms like Mariental have impacted the Namibian generation mix. Looking at the power generation mix of Namibia, we can clearly see how solar now supplies 27% of the generated power in the country, the highest percentage in Africa. We can also see that hydro in blue comes from Ruacana. And yes, these generation figures excludes imports from South Africa. The Benban Solar Park in Egypt is Africa's largest solar farm and the 5th largest in the world, and it makes sense too, with the area having solar potential of 6.3 kilowatt hours per square meter per day. And with a capacity of 1,650 megawatts, it has panels that follow the sun on a single axis. And it's a big part of the country's Nubian Sun's feed-in tariff program, which aims to encourage more businesses to invest in renewable energy initiatives. Morocco is reducing its dependence on imported coal with facilities such as the Noor solar power station at the town of Ouarzazate. And what we see below us is the world's largest concentrated solar plant with molten salt storage, built in 4 phases that we can also see below us. The total storage is 3 gigawatt hours. It's also necessary to note how high the water consumption is at 4.6 liters per kilowatt hour because of the designed wet cooling and the need to regularly clean the reflectors. Kenya often faces power supply problems, national blackouts, regional power outages, and rapidly rising electricity prices. And Devki Steel's rooftop solar installation, which we see below us, is the largest rooftop solar plant in East, West, and Central Africa, significantly boosting the clean energy generation for Devki Steel. It is installed in the town of Ruiru with a capacity of 4 megawatts. And here in Zambia, we see the 13 megawatt solar PV powering the Ruida copper mine with its hybrid microgrid system. It's Africa's largest microgrid, also has 39 megawatt hours of battery storage, and diesel generator acts as a backup supply during the low solar conditions, especially at night. Solar is also key to enabling agriculture in Africa, and here we see irrigation with solar power in Sudan, cold storage with solar in Nigeria, food processing with solar in Tanzania, and dairy farming with solar also in Tanzania. This is transforming agriculture in Africa. But small off-grid power is growing very rapidly in Africa, and one great example of this is off-grid electric. In Tanzania, they offer solar home systems with pay-as-you-go. In Rwanda, they extend distributed solar access to rural and peri-urban users, and it integrates battery storage, LED lighting, and small appliances in the system. It uses mobile money and prepaid billing to reach low-income households, and it aims scalable deployment across all of East Africa under the Empower model. So Boitumelo, after we've now done solar, let's visit hydro. What is the role of hydropower in Africa?
With a proud history of hydropower and under pressure from the International Energy Agency and the International Hydropower Association, a great deal is happening, but slowly, in hydropower. Hydropower actually supplies about 3% of energy, 7% of primary energy, and 17% of electricity. Headlines here tell a story of many plans for hydro expansion. We see that in Ethiopia, it opens Africa's largest hydro dam. The World Bank funds Malawi hydropower storage. The Burundi launches $320 million hydropower project, while Uganda commissions China-financed hydropower plant. Tanzania Ramakali hydro nears its completion, and Mozambique plans the Empada Nkua regional dam. On the other hand, we see Cameroon selects the Kikot hydro project development, and Malawi's Mpatamanga project doubles hydropower. With this in mind, Andy, can you tell us which major river or rivers actually support hydro?
Below us we can see the Blue Nile, the White Nile, the Niger, the Senegal, the Congo, and the Zambezi rivers supporting most hydro in Africa. But we can also see the names of the major African hydro plants. Africa has 42 gigawatts of hydropower at 90 major plants. Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Egypt, Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Angola, Cameroon, and Burundi rely most heavily on hydropower. And China's role in hydropower development is very important in sub-Saharan Africa, where it is expected to be involved in nearly 70% of new capacity being added. For example, China has actively supported hydro developments in Ethiopia and Sudan, Angola, Ghana, and Zimbabwe by means of finance, engineering, procurement, and construction. Chinese finance is also much faster than that from the World Bank. Let's visit the impressive Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Karuma, Julius Nyerere, and the Plan Inga hydropower plants in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Below us we see the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the largest hydropower dam in Africa and the 7th largest in the world. It's located on the Blue Nile River in Ethiopia, has a capacity of 5,150 megawatts, started filling the reservoir in July 2020, and it will take between 4 and 7 years to fill with water, depending on the hydrologic conditions during the filling period. That dam generates enough electricity to power Ethiopia and Kenya and Sudan, and also provides irrigation for 1.5 million hectares of land. It's a real symbol of African nationalism, and yes, its construction has been controversial, with Egypt and Sudan expressing concerns about its impact on water availability. However, Ethiopia has maintained that the dam is necessary for its development. Importantly, the construction of a Chinese-built DC transmission line connecting Kenya to Ethiopia is now completed and enables 2,000 megawatts of power to be transferred between the countries. This means that Ethiopia is now fully reliant on renewable electricity. Let's look at the country's electricity production. Ethiopian electricity is now fully supplied by hydro and wind, as we can see. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam can supply 16 terawatt hours of additional power, not yet fully shown on this graph. Below us we see the Karuma hydro plant in Uganda, commissioned in 2024. It's Uganda's largest hydro power project ever, adds 600 megawatts to the national grid. It's been built by Sino Hydro with Chinese financing worth $1.7 billion, and is located on the White Nile, so strengthening East Africa's energy security. The construction faced delays from funding, flooding, and other technical issues. And here in Tanzania, we see the Julius Nyerere hydropower plant on the Rufiji River near the border with Burundi. It has a capacity of 2,115 megawatts. It's owned by TANESCO. Construction began back in 2019. First power was delivered in 2024, and it now serves as a major contributor to Tanzania's economic development. And I suspect Tanzania can phase out its coal-fired power generation soon. The Congo River of Central Equatorial Africa has vast potential at Inga in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Congo River is the Amazon of Africa, and it collects water from rainfall in the whole equatorial basin. And Grand Inga is a very ambitious proposal to eventually generate 42,000 megawatts of hydropower. And below us we see a satellite picture of the Congo River on the right and a schematic on the left. And we can see Inga 1, which is existing Inga 2, the planned Inga 3 of 11 gigawatts, and Grand Inga of 40 gigawatts with power supply to Southern Africa and or Europe. This, in my view, is the most complex international energy project ever. And after engagement by the government of the DRC with Fortescue of Australia, with South Africa, with Spain and China on restarting Inga work, the World Bank in November last year issued a fact sheet to confirm that it is in discussion with the government about Inga 3. Time will tell. But hydropower is important to the DRC, and let's travel to Kibali. Below us we see Kibali, Africa's largest and most advanced gold mine. It's operated by Barrick Anglo Gold and Congo State Company Sokimo, and is powered mainly by hydropower from 3 nearby stations, and it combines open pit and deep underground mining for efficiency. So having seen hydro in the DRC, let's move south to look at coal in South Africa, where you are, Boitumelo.
In Africa, coal supplies about 10% of energy, 20% of primary energy, and 25% electrification. Interestingly, 22% of coal production is exported, while a little is imported mainly to Morocco. The coal headlines tell a story of Eskom utilizing 108 metric ton of coal in 2024, Zimbabwe expanding the hunger pole, while Mozambique's Revuba reveals massive coking coal reserves. Kenya's planned Lamu coal plant faces environmental backlash, and Morocco is planning to phase out coal by 2040. This is the time to see why African coal is actually South African coal.
As we can see from the red markers, all the significant coal mines and coal plants and coal use in Africa is really in South Africa. Africa's coal-fired capacity totals 50 gigawatts. The main coal users are South Africa, but also smaller volumes in Morocco, Botswana, Zimbabwe and Mozambique. South Africa alone counts for over 80% of the coal-fired generating capacity. Most of the coal-fired power plants use domestically mined coal, except for Morocco, which imports entirely. And new coal development has been slowing as a result of both renewables and gas gaining traction. Let's visit 5 coal places: the Medupi coal-fired power plant, Grootegeluk coal mine, Sasol and Secunda, Richards Bay and Yorf Lasfar up in Morocco. The Medupi power station is a dry-cooled coal-fired power station built by Eskom in South Africa, and with an installed capacity of 4,800 megawatts, it is the 8th largest coal-fired power station in the world, built very near the Grootegeluk colliery that supplies it. And here below us we see the Grootegeluk colliery, the largest coal mine in South Africa, which produces coking coal, thermal coal and metallurgical coal. And with a capacity of 18 million tonnes per year, it feeds Matimba and Medupi by conveyor belts, as we can see below us. Coal-fired power generation is very important to keep mining going in South Africa, and iron ore is the 4th biggest industry in the mining sector in the country. And the Sishen Iron Ore Complex is a large number of iron ore mines located in central South Africa in the Northern Cape. And Sishen represents one of the largest iron ore reserves in South Africa and in the world, with estimated reserves of 2 billion tonnes of ore. And that complex requires energy for mining and for the Sishen-Saldanha railway line. Yes, mines across all of Africa require reliable, continuous electricity to power extraction, processing and its safety systems. And unstable grids drive the adoption of self-generation of renewables and increasing hybrid solutions to sustain productivity and competitiveness. Remaining in southern Africa, we visit Mozambique and the Mozal aluminium smelter in Maputo, one of the largest smelters in Africa, alongside Hillside in South Africa. It is owned and operated by South 32. It produces 560,000 tonnes of aluminium ingots, powered by imported electricity from South Africa. That power agreement expires in 2026, currently without a replacement, and the future for Mozal is most uncertain. Also in South Africa, we visit Secunda, the coal-to-liquids synthetic fuel plant owned by Sasol. And it uses the Fischer-Tropsch liquefaction to produce petroleum-like synthetic crude from coal. It uses 40 million tonnes per year of coal, from which it produces 150,000 barrels of petroleum products per day. It also produces 60 million tonnes of CO2 per year. That makes it the largest coal liquefaction plant in the world, but also the largest single emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, a major headache for the country's nationally determined contribution. And that transformation of Sasol towards a company with a smaller greenhouse gas footprint is the most critical challenge for the South African energy transition. Now, having seen the extensive use of coal in the South African energy economy, let's see coal in its primary energy. Looking at South African primary energy consumption, we can quite clearly see that it has been declining as a result of poor economic growth. We can also see that coal dominates primary energy for its use in power and for coal, gas for petroleum. We can see that the emissions from primary energy in South Africa is declining from a combination of three factors: the aging coal plants which have been retired, the rapid growth of wind and solar, and the economic slowdown in the country. When we look at power generation, we can see that coal dominates power generation. And last week, South Africa announced its integrated resource plan for 2025, featuring by 2039 an additional 25,000 megawatts of solar PV, 34,000 of additional wind, 8,500 megawatts of storage, 16,000 megawatts of gas to power, with 6,000 already built by 2030, 5,200 megawatts of nuclear, with a path to reaching 10,000 megawatts, 16,000 megawatts of distributed generation, and a clean coal demo plant by 2030. We see no new coal-fired power generation. On the other hand, frankly, the plan is both unachievable and unaffordable for the country and is going to require a major rethink. But South Africa has also been a major coal exporter for the past 30 years. Let's go to Richards Bay. Below us we see the Richards Bay coal export terminal on the South African east coast, the largest coal export terminal in Africa. We can clearly see the facilities below us. It has a capacity of 91 million tons per year, which in the past was exported to Asia. Currently only exports 52 million tons per year, mainly due to transportation problems with rail. And some of the coal has also gone to Morocco. Let's briefly travel to Morocco to see that. Yorflasfar is Morocco's largest coal-fired power station. It has a capacity of 2,000 megawatts. It supplies roughly 50% of Morocco's baseload electricity demand, and its coal is mainly imported from South Africa, Russia, Indonesia, and the United States via the Yorflasfar port next to it on the Atlantic coast that we can also see below us. Now, that concludes our coal tour, and next we turn to nuclear and go back to South Africa.
Nuclear power is currently insignificant in African energy and power. It supplies 0% energy, 0% of primary energy, and 1% of electricity. News headlines tell us of a considerable interest in nuclear. We look at the Al Dabaa plant, which advances in Egypt's nuclear power rollout. We look at South Africa, which prepares the 5 gigawatt of nuclear project to stabilize its grid. Kenya proposes 1,000 megawatt of nuclear plant near the Lake Victoria, while Nigeria signs a memorandum of understanding for the 4,800 megawatt of nuclear power complex, and Ethiopia planning the 2,400 megawatt of the nuclear project with Rosatom. With these headlines, it is clear that cabinets are considering nuclear power and that Russia is very much active in Africa. Andy, do you take us to Gubert in South Africa and Al Dabaa in Egypt?
Our first nuclear visit is to Koeberg, a 1,840 megawatt facility commissioned back in 1984-85. And Koeberg has served an important role in power supply to the Western Cape, around Cape Town. Currently, Koeberg is Africa's sole commercial nuclear power facility, and it contributes about 5% of South Africa's electricity generation and will continue to do so after recent life extension. The Al Dabaa nuclear power plant is Egypt's first nuclear power plant, situated on the Mediterranean coast. The facility is designed to have a total capacity of 4,800 megawatts, which will be generated by 4 pressurized water reactors, Russian design. The project is the result of an agreement between Egypt and Russia, and the Russian state nuclear corporation Rosatom is the primary contractor. responsible for the construction, the operation, the maintenance and decommissioning of the plant. Russia has also provided a significant portion of the funding required for the construction. I will be very surprised if any further large nuclear reactors are built in Africa in the next 20 years. So at the end of our nuclear tour, we turn to wind power that already generates 3 times more power than nuclear on the continent.
When we look at wind power supplies 0% of energy, 1% of primary energy, 3% of electricity. And the headlines here of wind tells us a story. The Anthem plans 11 gigawatt of wind and solar rollout in SA. Niger advances 250 megawatt of Bataka wind farm project. Kenya Lake Takuna wind powers 1 million homes, while Tunisia selects offshore wind project under Energy Corridor. On the other hand, we see Morocco planning the 600 megawatt wind park for hydrogen. Let's discover where the wind farms in Africa are.
Africa's installed wind capacity is 10 gigawatts, today at 113 onshore wind farms. There are no offshore wind farms in Africa. South Africa leads with 4 gigawatts of capacity. Egypt follows closely with 2 gigawatts, and Morocco operates 2 gigawatts as well. Kenya has 800 megawatts, mainly from Lake Turkana. Let's visit Ras Gharib, Lake Turkana, the Eastern Cape cluster of 5 wind farms, and Tarfaya in Morocco. The 650 megawatt Ras Gharib wind farm on the Red Sea coast sits next to 3 others, West Bakir, Gabal El Tait and Zafarana. And Ras Gharib is the largest in Africa. ENGIE co-developed the project using 125 Siemens Gamesa turbines that we can see, and it's part of the ambitious Egyptian expansion of solar and wind and nuclear and gas-fired power generation. Next, we travel south to the Lake Turkana wind farm in Kenya with a capacity of 310 megawatts. The plant had a troubled startup due to transmission delays and also now troubled land ownership matters. But already wind energy in Kenya accounts for more than 14% of power generation capacity in Kenya, and plans for new build and expanded projects will be limited by the securing of offtake and the availability of sufficient transmission capacity and capabilities. Looking at Kenya's power generation mix, we can see that 14% of power comes from wind in Kenya, and we can also see that 43% of Kenya power comes from geothermal, which is the highest percentage in the world. And let's do a quick side visit to geothermal in Kenya. Kenya leads Africa in geothermal power generation capacity, and the Olkaria fields near Lake Naivasha form Kenya's geothermal backbone. It provides reliable baseload, and over 800 megawatts are generated from Olkaria's steam-rich wells. An expansion continues under KenGen and global renewable partnerships. Unlike solar power, wind power does not run off-grid, and transmission integration is a challenge all over Africa. And below us we can see 5 wind farms, Cookhouse, Njoli, Nkuba, Amakala and Golden Valley, all located near Eskom's Poseidon main transmission station for such evacuation of power. These 5 wind farms have a combined capacity of 617 megawatts. But still, Eskom's transmission grid capacity and the bid window process are the 2 biggest constraints to wind power growth in that country. Morocco has no hydrocarbon reserves, very good wind and solar resources, and major renewable energy export plans. Tafaya in the southwestern part of Morocco has started generating electricity with a capacity of 300 megawatts. It's the largest in Morocco. And we will see where that goes in future in terms of the ambitious plans of the country. That brings our wind tour to an end, and we move to electricity storage in Africa.
Electricity storage is so important to deal with the intermittency of renewables. African countries have 70 gigawatt hour of pumped storage and 32 gigawatt hour of battery storage. Storage news headlines speak of Morocco shortlisting bidders for pumped hydro project, Africa's largest battery red sands reaching commercial close, Egypt commissions the combo, which is the first large battery system, while solar battery systems reshape energy's procurement in Africa. We also look at pumped storage toolkit that has been launched to accelerate project development by International Hydro Power Association. And where are the major electricity storage plants in Africa?
Below us we see the pump storage and battery storage plants of Africa. There's 3.3 gigawatts of capacity in South Africa and Morocco in pump storage, and 2 gigawatts of battery, mainly in South Africa. Let's visit Ingula, Afura, Kenat, and Fekola. South Africa has 65 gigawatt hours of storage at 4 pump storage stations called Ingula, Drakensberg, Palmit, and Steenbras. And the Ingula pump storage scheme below us is a pump storage station in the escarpment of the Drakensberg. It's operated by Eskom. It has 1,300 megawatts of capacity with 21 gigawatt hours of storage. And that provides 3 roles in demand fluctuations, managing breakdowns of coal-fired power plants, and balancing the intermittency of renewables. Afura here in Morocco is the country's first major pump storage hydropower facility. It provides 465 megawatts of capacity. We can see the upper and lower reservoirs. It's located in the Atlas Mountains near the town of Beni Mellal. And Morocco also has a second pump storage station, Abdel Moumen, of 350 megawatts, and is seeking to expand. In South Africa, Norwegian renewable power producer Sehlake operates one of the world's largest hybrid solar and battery projects in Kenat. It combines 540 megawatts of solar that we can see with 225 megawatt, 1,140 megawatt hours of battery storage capacity. And under a 20-year power purchase agreement with Eskom, it will provide 150 megawatts of dispatchable power to the grid every day for 16 daytime hours. We also visit the Fekola gold mine in Mali. It has 30 megawatts of solar that we can clearly see below us, but also 17 megawatts, 15 megawatt hours of battery storage, and an additional 64 megawatts of diesel that allows it to meet half its daytime electricity demand from solar. Boitumelo, tell us about power and hydrogen exports from Africa.
That brings us to power and hydrogen exports to Europe, where the reality is that zero power and zero hydrogen and ammonium are currently being exported from Africa to Europe, which is its closest market. The news headlines, nevertheless, do contain a story of hope, where X-Link Morocco UK, which cable project has been cancelled, Euro-Africa interconnector to carry Egyptian power into Europe, Total Energy eyeing Moroccan green ammonia export to Europe, while the North Africa hydrogen corridor is envisioned for the European market, and the EU pledging £11.5 billion to support South Africa's hydrogen exports. So, Andy, at the end of our tour, how does the African energy transition compare with other countries.
So as we come to the end of the African Energy Supply Transition Tour, let's ask ourselves what is the same and what is different from the energy transitions taking place in other continents. It is the same in that the fundamental drivers and goals are shared worldwide: the need for affordable, reliable and sustainable energy to power agriculture, mining, housing, business, transport and industry. As elsewhere, oil, coal and gas currently supply the largest share of energy, while solar and wind are expanding rapidly as clean alternatives. Nuclear and hydro remain relatively small, but face growing pressure to increase their contribution. And likewise, battery and solar systems are being installed behind the meter to enhance energy security. And lastly, green hydrogen production everywhere is still at an early stage with no significant commercial output. But the African energy supply transition is also fundamentally different from the same in other continents and countries. Africa enjoys abundant solar availability, yet it remains home to the largest number of people without access to electricity. The affordability of energy is the lowest in the world, while wood and biomass continue to serve as dominant energy sources for millions. At the same time, Africa exports vast quantities of energy in the form of oil, gas and coal for national budgets, even as over 600 million Africans still live without access to electricity. Competitive power markets and cost-effective pricing are still rare in Africa, with many African utilities operating under state control. And as a result, Africa's transition is defined by deep tensions between access and affordability, making its pathway towards a modern low-carbon energy future distinct from that of any other continent. Tour headlines and main takeaways on screen. Let's take some audience questions.